Okay, DataVita, you fairly recently published your record-breaking financial results for, I think, year ending June 2024. Clearly good news, and just clearly we're a little bit further on from there as that sort of financial success continued for the second half of the year. Just, yeah, talk us through that.
Yes, obviously we saw strong growth last year. That was really built on our long-term core success. There's a lot of talk about AI in the market, and DataVita's doing a lot of extensions into that. However, this success we've seen has really come from our more traditional business in the past. Co-location continues to be strong. Private cloud offerings tend to be really strong. So we are continuing to see very positive movements, especially around cloud repatriation projects. So people coming back in from the hyperscalers, workloads coming back in. We are certainly seeing an uptick in business and an interest on more bespoke cloud services rather than the kind of hyperscale services as the one-shop answer to everything.
Okay, and in terms of, I guess it is a new focus for the company, and you obviously do loads of things already, but I believe you sort of stated you've got a new focus or objective to become Scotland's sort of leading provider of AI-ready data centres. So I guess those are the words. So what are the actions, if you like, that you've got to carry out in order to deliver on that? Or, you know, what work are you up to?
Yeah, so obviously you have to live under a rock not to know the AI movement and everything that's going on. We are seeing a massive uptick in demand, mainly due to the FLAP-D regions being at full capacity. So the main data center hubs that have traditionally done very well, they simply don't have capacity. So we've been on the go for 7 or 8 years, and almost all of our customers have a geographical reason to be in Scotland. Up until recently, we had tried to attract inward data center customers, but they simply weren't interested. If you're not in Dublin, London, Frankfurt, Paris, etc., Amsterdam, they weren't interested in talking. But these regions have now seen that they're simply out of capacity. So we have an exponential increase in demand for data centers, and not enough data centers that are able to fulfill that. Now, interestingly, when we say AI-ready data centers, we are really talking around being able to support the power densities we're talking about. So a traditional data center rack was 4 kilowatts. It's been 4 kilowatts since time began, and that was the typical average we saw customers taking. An AI rack can be upwards of 150, 160 kilowatts per rack within the same footprint. So the first requirement we saw was there is a lot of legacy data centers that simply aren't able to deploy those solutions. They weren't designed for those densities. Luckily enough, our facility is relatively modern, so that had been taken into account. So we were able to support those infrastructures. So already we are in a fortunate position where we can actually fulfill some of these very high density workloads. Scotland also has very low carbon energy. So for these very high power workloads, we're in a very good location to deliver really sustainable services, which a lot of companies really care about now. So it's really, when we say a focus, it's really an evolution of our existing business. We've always been able to support it. But as we are now fitting out more data center space, that data center space will be predominantly AI data center space, so designed for these very high density workloads. We will still fit out some traditional space within our data centers. That side of the business isn't disappearing, but where we see the big opportunity is those very, very high capacity racks.
Okay, yeah, you say you're designing for AI, so that involves what? I mean, everyone's talking about liquid cooling, so do you have to have that? If not, I guess you don't necessarily install liquid cooling, but you have it, the liquid, if you like, or the infrastructure ready to deliver the type of liquid cooling that maybe a client wants. What other sort of infrastructure do you have to, or is different from, shall we call it, say, a traditional data center?
So data centers are always about cycles. So about probably 8 years ago, there was a movement for efficiency, where everything went to adiabatic cooling, so indirect free air cooling. So you're simply using the outside temperature topped up with some misting of water to get those air temperatures down, and you're moving high volumes of air going through it. So most data centers, and our data center uses that just now for our traditional halls. The issue with that technology is there's a limit to densities that you can cool, because you're simply relying on the movement of air through a rack. So that technology is no longer suitable. So you need chilled water in a chilled water loop to be able to do that. Also, that saves a tremendous amount of water as well, which is becoming more important. So because of the density of these racks, the cooling methodology is fundamentally changed. So traditionally, you pass cooled air in the front of a rack, it gets dragged over all the hot components, and you exhaust it out the back. And that's all done with fans and heat sinks. The temperatures we're seeing within racks now are simply too high. So most of the modern, of the latest AI infrastructure is coming out with CDUs, which basically is in-rack heat transfer technology. So we would provide cool water to the CDUs that then in turn run that cooled water actually through the IT systems themselves. So you've got direct liquid cooling from the hottest components, the GPUs, the CPUs, the power supplies, and then you exhaust that heat out the back. So you really need a high volume closed loop chilled water cooling technology. It's the only way that you can do it. The other technology is rear door chillers. So that's where you basically put it's a reverse refrigerator coil in the back of your data center rack. But again, that requires cold water to work with that technology. So the cooling element is the biggest issue that data centers are dealing with. If we look at a traditional, one of our traditional data halls, we could lose cooling in one of those halls maybe for about half an hour before we breached SLA, because the temperature would slowly creep up. You then get to a stage where you get thermal runaway, and at that point you can't recover it. There isn't enough cooling, and it simply scales and goes up and up and up. For our AI data halls, we are looking at 3 minutes for that thermal runaway to occur. In some of the even higher density ones, the 500 kilowatt racks that people are talking about, you're looking at 30 seconds. So how you design these, the SLAs around them, it's a real engineering issue that data centers are having to deal with. The next element outside of cooling is how you get power to these racks. So you're having to basically put a tremendous amount of power into a very small physical location. So traditionally you would do that by bus bar, but then the bus bars are going up in size, you're having to stack them, so you need to have bigger roof heights. So the data centers themselves are fundamentally changing. In our traditional data center designs, about 30% of the overall space was for plant, mechanical and electrical plant. It's now completely flipped, where it's about 30% of the space is now the data center hall space, and the rest of it's plant, just due to the size and scale and the power densities.
Okay, yeah, that's quite a change. And something else that you've been, I think, focusing on alongside, and I think this was last year, but it'd still be good to understand what it is. You established the national, I think what we call the national cloud. So it'd be good to understand. You referenced earlier, hyperscalers, and perhaps people are not as enamored of them as they are. So I'm guessing it might be something to do with that. But please tell us a bit more about what the national cloud is.
Yeah, so national cloud has been set up out of necessity. It's organically growing. Time and time again, we get customers coming to us with real challenging workloads, things that simply can't go into the public cloud, or things that have went to the public cloud and it turns out it's too expensive. So what we've done is, using our knowledge over the last 5 years of designing really bespoke cloud systems, we've taken that to market. So it allows customers allocation for their most challenging workloads. And when we're talking about challenging workloads, it could be legacy, it could be security, It could be really super high performance, licensing issues, data sovereignty issues, all these really challenging workloads. We've designed cloud services that still give customers all the benefits of cloud, i.e. the burstability, the flexibility, but without the downside that sometimes holds a public cloud back when dealing with these really challenging workloads. Now, we're quite targeted. If a customer comes to us and says, I want to put 200 virtual machines in Azure, or I want to put 200 virtual machines in National Cloud, that's probably not the right customer for us if they don't have the real challenges that we do. When we find the right customers who have these challenges, it's a really simple sales cycle for us because we are solving problems that have been about in IT for decades.
Okay, and you referenced earlier sustainability, obviously the attractions of the I think it was the power supply, low carbon. But I'm just wondering, in terms of the slightly changing geopolitical landscape that we're sort of witnessing, do you think sustainability will in any way reduce in importance within the industry? Will it sort of go with, yeah, particularly as there's a lot of finance companies which have, if not rode back, at least they're indicated that they're happy to be slightly less stringent sustainability wise in the last month or so. Do you worry that that's a trend that might continue, or do you think the data center industry and yourselves particularly are just committed to sustainability because that's, it is what it is, and regardless of opinion, shall we say, that's what
Yeah.
needs to be done, or do you worry that there might be a slight sort of pushback against the way it's going?
No, so in terms of, I think the thing people miss about sustainability, when it comes to low carbon, it normally, if you reduce carbon, you normally reduce cost. So people still care about that. So regardless, if a company doesn't care about sustainability, they still want to be in the most efficient facility that they can be. And that very often drives a sustainable outcome, regardless. So there is the cost side of it as well. We are still seeing, especially the large enterprises, wanting to do the right thing about sustainability. The education sector, when it comes to higher education and research, they're very focused on sustainability. So I think in some aspects, sustainability will take a step back. But I think overall, in the long-term trend, I think everyone understands that having sustainable practices built in not only reduces cost, but also fundamentally is the right thing to do.
Okay, and if sustainability's a big, if not the biggest sort of focus for the industry, are there any other challenges or challenges also can be seen as opportunities that, whether it's for yourselves or you think the industry more generally? I know people talk about skills, for example, and bemoan the fact that there's a lack of that, but then nobody seems to be panicking. Just your thoughts. Yeah, what is there anything that keeps you awake at night or not? Shall we say?
I wouldn't say keeps me awake at night, but there's certainly is challenges ahead of us. The biggest challenge is probably around access to power and power at a competitive price. AI is going to be determined by the cost of power. Everyone gets overly focused on GPUs and infrastructure, and of course you need this. But after the GPUs, the second biggest cost is power. So does the UK want to be an AI innovation hub like they claim to be? If they do, then there has to be certain things change when it comes to taxation around power. So that's a big element. The second point is then access to that power. The more power we need, I think data centers are going to have to start providing their own power. So we're going to have to come with our own generation, our own mini substations, etc. So I think that is critical, but then that goes into the overall planning strategies as well that we need help with. So planning and power is probably the biggest blocker to the UK data centre provision just now. The UK government are announcing soon their AI innovation zones, and we hope once we see the detail of those AI innovation zones, they are designed to simplify the process of getting power and getting planning permission. So everyone's hopeful that when we see these things, it will address some of the issues.
And you're optimistic, because I mean, I'm not particularly picking on this government, but all governments may be have indicated they don't fully understand the industry, shall we say, in the past. Do you think this hopefully is going to be different, that they do understand the challenges and therefore will help you, or bearing in mind the friction that, the data center industry is often portrayed as this huge power hungry sector that will stop housing estates being built, etc. So
Yeah.
sort of data centers or houses or whatever. Do you worry about that still, or do you think that the direction of travel now seems to be a better understanding of why data centers do matter, and also that it's not an either or, it needs to be both, and how do you get there?
Yeah, it's probably the most positive time we've had politically for data centres. Completely agree. We're often seen as big sheds full of computers and storage that don't create jobs, whereas the actual facts of data centres, they create a halo effect around them. They pull in innovation, they pull in startups, they pull in research. We very often have to reinforce local infrastructure. We work well within our local communities. And the UK government does seem to understand this. So all of the messaging that we've seen, all of the information that's been coming out from the AI action plan, that's coming out from DSIT, seems very positive in terms of they do fundamentally understand that for the next industrial revolution, which is AI, the data center is the critical part of that. So proof's in the pudding, devil's in the detail, to use all of those analogies, but they certainly seem to be saying that they understand it.
Okay, and in terms of yourselves, you've got quite a lot to keep you busy with the AI. Obviously, that we talked about the national cloud. Is there anything else on the roadmap you can share, or just your direction of travel, more of the same? You're looking at other things. I mean, you mentioned, for example, when it comes to power, for example, are you looking to develop your own sort of microgrids, etc.? Just whatever you can share as to plans for the future.
Yeah, so two main developments. One, we aim to bring to market roughly 500 megawatts of data center capacity over the next 5 years across 3 different sites. So that's a significant amount of data center space, especially for Scotland. To go with that, we think it's critical that data centers do generate their own electricity, maybe not all of it, but the vast majority of it, and take some of the strain off the grid. So all of these projects that we are looking at come with their own directly connected renewable energy sources. Two things: it makes it as carbon efficient as possible, but because it's private wire, it also gives us a real opportunity to look at the cost of electricity and to pass some of those savings directly on to our customers. And again, the cost of electricity is a real barrier for organisations outside of the UK if they are looking at, will I go to the Nordics and pay 6 cents a kilowatt hour, or will we come to the UK and pay 20? Where do you think they're going to go? So we need to get that power price closer down, and we think the best way to do that is to take ownership of it.
Okay, and just I'm sure you won't give me too much but in terms of that extra capacity, which is quite significant, I'm guessing that's not just where on the existing. You are looking at a sort of new developments as well.
Yeah, so the planning permission's about to go in for it. So once we put the planning permission, everyone will know where it is. But it's 5 different sites across the central belt of Scotland. So it's still within the same region that we operate in just now. Very low carbon, but spread across that central belt of Scotland.
Okay, it's been great to catch up, and plenty going on. Some lovely insights into what's going on at yourselves and thoughts about the industry. So Danny, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.